In this video, I'm going to show you how to use feedback that you receive maybe from an instructor or from a peer. So I'm going to use my way of giving feedback as the example here, and so you'll see different tools being used, including track changes, comment bubbles, giving an overall comment, and then also including a checklist. So what we have here is a paper by I'm a Good Writer. Definitely a real name. And you can see that there are comments on the right-hand side, and there are also comments within the text of the essay itself. So starting at the top, we have these comments on the right-hand side, and these are comments using the comment feature in Microsoft Word, and they can have comments and links, any number of things, pictures even. So here we have a comment, use APA formatting for this assignment, and there's a link to a resource for that. As we keep going down, there's a comment on the title, and this is a positive feedback comment, so nice descriptive title. And then you can see little changes to the text using track changes will appear in some other color. Often it's red, it might be purple, blue, green, whatever. And sometimes they're hard to find. Like if it's just a comma, it might be real easy to miss that there. So note that there are these lines on the left-hand side. And if you click them and it appears to be a red line, that means that the comments are hidden or the changes are hidden. And if you click on it and it becomes gray, that indicates that the track changes are visible. And you can see that there is a line corresponding to every line that has a change. So if we keep going down, we see this example here where there's temporarily appointed that is in red and it's underlined, and that indicates that those words have been added as feedback. So this person who's giving feedback recommended those two words be added so that maybe the sentence is more clear. Then we have another comment, another positive comment here. And we have a track changes addition that isn't actually an addition, it's a comment. And so people will do this. So this is one of the reasons why you don't just automatically accept every track changes change that somebody makes. For one, you need to go through and make sure that you agree with those recommendations and changes. And in addition, you could have these comments show up that aren't actually meant to be included in the text. So the comment is, why is this a problem? So this sentence here wants more information. The person wants more information about why it's a problem. Going down further, you can see the text is red and has a line through it. That means that the wording was in the draft that the person was looking at, and they think you should delete that text. So here we have add a comma, remove a dash in addition to, and add the word and. And so this is just sentence level editing that would improve the clarity of the sentence. And then we have another comment here with some explanation that the thesis statement might be too narrow and what to do if that is the case. Then we have some more comments here. Citation needed, so the reviewer feels like the information provided is not common knowledge, that a source is being used, and so that source needs to be cited. And here, one thing that I will use is if there's an issue with plagiarism. So for example, quoting is occurring, but there's no quotation marks or citation, or just accidentally somebody's too close to the original writing in a source, I will highlight it in red and put a note in indicating this is word for word the same as the original source. If you're going to do that, it has to be quoted and cited, or changes need to be made so that the wording isn't too close to the original source. So in that case, making it a summary or a paraphrase of the original. Going down further, we have more comments. And so we have a comment here, your topic sentence about defining contingent faculty doesn't match up with the supporting details of the rest of the paragraph, which are about the number of contingent faculty. So either revise the topic sentence or move the number information to another paragraph. And so sometimes these comments can be more work than what is in using track changes, adding a word, deleting a word, moving words around. And so that will take more work, either revising the topic sentence or moving the supporting detail sentences to a new paragraph with a different topic sentence. And then we have more changes, more additions, a question about if wording can be simplified, a example of a statistic being out of place, doesn't match the point or the topic sentence for that paragraph. Here's an example of what it would look like if you wanted to include a section heading in APA format. And so this person is recommending if you want to use questions to help categorize information, you should use section headings. This is what it would look like. And as you can see, as we go through, just more comments where citations are needed. Avoid ending paragraphs with quotes because you should be providing explanation, context, or showing how it's connected to the point you're making whenever you're using a quote. A missing topic sentence, so the main point of the paragraph isn't clear before it jumps into supporting details. Transition needed, so how do you get from the previous point paragraph to this paragraph's point? You have to show the connection for the reader. On down to here we have the references. And then at the very bottom here we have an overall comment. So sometimes people use this, sometimes they don't. If they have enough comments throughout the paper, they might feel like that's enough. Otherwise, they might want a summative statement like this. Overall, you have a great start here. There are some paragraphs that need to be reorganized so that the topic sentence main point matches the supporting details and the conclusion paragraph is missing. However, you're doing an excellent job of picking source material to share with your audiences, statistics, expert quotes, research findings, etc. And then below that is an example of a feedback checklist. So depending on who's giving you feedback, they may have a checklist of things that you need to do or things that you need to work on. And so here's an example that if there is a check mark next to the piece of writing that is being talked about, the skill, convention, rule, that there's a problem with it. So somehow needs to be fixed, that there's an error or a room for improvement throughout the document. So this is an example, talks about writing conventions and skills to improve on. So missing or unclear topic sentence, we saw that earlier. Paragraph unity, one main point per paragraph, we saw that talked about earlier. Knowing how to quote and avoiding plagiarism, we saw that example earlier. And then another section about grammar conventions and skills, punctuation, and finally documentation. So in this case, the example is in APA. So there were missing APA in text citations, incorrect in text citation placement, and a missing APA title page. So overall, that is an example of how feedback can be provided. You can use comments, there could be track changes, there could be a checklist, overall statements, or summative statements at the end. And so you need to go through and look at the feedback that you're receiving and decide what you're going to work on. So particularly if you are getting feedback from multiple places, you can't just look at one and say, yep, I'm going to do everything they say. You need to look at the multiple people that they've commented on your draft giving you feedback and see what you're going to include or not. And I think the best way to do that is actually to have a separate draft that you're working on. So instead of cleaning up a draft that you've received feedback on, you actually open up the original or save another version of the original as a revision, revision number 1 that you're working on, and you can apply the changes as you look at the feedback you're receiving from one person or multiple people. And the way that that could work is maybe you're going to do split screen if you drag a document over to the right, and then it'll take up half the screen and it'll ask you what you want to show up on the other half of the screen. You can get it so you have the document with the feedback on one side and your clean document on the other. And that allows you to look at the feedback and the comments that you're getting and then make those changes in your original or your revision file. Another way that you could do it is if you are doing this, getting feedback one person at a time and then applying that feedback and then moving it on to the next person, you could make the changes in the file where they've provided feedback. However, it's risky because it might not be clear everything that they've added or deleted if they didn't have track changes on the whole time. Or you might accidentally accept changes that would be inappropriate to include in a draft. So how you would do that is you would go to the very top of the screen, and it's under the Review tab, and you'll be able to see that this is where the comments are happening. If you add a comment, and then if you click on a comment, it allows you to delete it. And then also under Track Changes, you can turn it on or off. And if you are making changes to your draft, you want Track Changes off. And then you can actually go through and accept the suggested changes or reject them. And again, you don't want to just accept all changes and just, move on to the next submission or to turn it in, because that, again, allows accidents to happen where information that shouldn't be included all of a sudden becomes actual text in your draft. So one at a time, though, you could go through and say if you accept something or not. So for example, I'm going to start with temporarily appointed and say, sure, we'll accept that. And then it moves me on to this comment. I'm going to delete it. And then moves on to this, why is this a problem? And this one, if I accept it, you'll see it becomes a problem because now it's in parentheses, but it's, why is this a problem? Doesn't make any sense. So instead of accepting it, we would actually want to reject it and probably still deal with it. So maybe in another sentence or as part of that sentence, add to it explaining why it's a problem. Then move on to the next piece here. We'll say, do you want to accept the comma? Yes. Reject or accept this. I'm going to say accept, so on and so forth. So again, it isn't good to just accept everything because, again, this comment at the end that's explaining the thesis statements and potential limitations to the thesis statement that's currently here is not appropriate to become part of the draft. So you wouldn't want to just accept all and move on. But you could, if you wanted to, do that. You have to make sure that all of the comments are deleted, and you have to make sure that there are no track changes, which again you can see by the line in the left-hand margin if there are any remaining track changes. And you need to clean those up before you send it in if you're turning in an assignment, because instructors don't want notes from other people about, how things should be edited if you're taking other people's advice or not. The exception is, of course, if they tell you to do that. But, generally you should assume they do not want to see other people's comments and you editing in the paper. They want a clean final draft. And then, if you are moving it on from one person to the next to get feedback, it's actually harder to give feedback if somebody else has already given feedback on that draft. So generally speaking, you would want to clean it up, take it to, the next level, make it the best possible draft you can before you submit it to the next person for additional feedback. And you would want to give them a clean plate to start with. As I mentioned earlier, you can have really big things to work on, things that might affect the whole paper, and so you need to budget enough time when you're going through and looking at people's advice and figuring out what you are going to do with those suggested changes, or if there are big issues you need to address in the draft. You do not need to take every piece of advice. Sometimes reviewers are wrong, so they might make a suggestion and actually that's not what you were trying to do, so their suggestion isn't helpful, although it may indicate still that there is a problem with that piece of your paper. Or they may, give you conflicting information, feedback from somebody else, so you may need to decide which person is giving you the best feedback. And, with a school setting, unfortunately, you do need to consider who's grading. So if you're getting feedback from an instructor, I would recommend prioritizing that, simply because they are the ones ultimately who are going to be giving you a grade on the assignment.